In December 2022, a woman's dismembered body was found scattered across 3 miles of swamp in rural Georgia. It would take investigators nearly 6 months to give her a name. Not because the forensic work was slow, not because the evidence was thin, but because the man who killed her had already told everyone in her life that she was dead, and they had believed him. Every single one of them. Her name was Mindi Kassotis, and this is her story. Mindy Ruth Mabane was born on the 22nd of February 1982 in Sanford, Florida, to Frank and Betsy Mabane. She grew up to be the kind of person you remember, not because she was loud or showy, but because she paid attention. She listened, she asked questions and meant them. At Armstrong Atlantic State University in Savannah, she studied political science. After graduating, she completed a master's degree in public and international affairs at Virginia Tech. Then came Washington, D.C. and the legal career. But the work that truly lit her up was the podcast she created, Compelling Women, where she interviewed women whose stories deserved a wider audience. Her close friends Morgan Paddock and Angela Wynne both appeared as guests. Morgan described it simply. "It was beautiful," she said, "and it was special." The people who knew Mindy consistently reached for the same words. Smart, kind, creative, full of life. She wanted a family. She had plans and dreams and a belief, apparently unshakable, that the world was capable of delivering the good things it promised. And so, when she met a man on a dating app in 2015, Angela watched the relationship develop and felt nothing but joy. When she finally did meet him, Angela said that was just her fairy tale ending coming to fruition. His name was Nicholas James Casotes. On the 9th of October 2016, they married at Morven Park in Leesburg, Virginia. She was 34 years old. In late November 2022, Mindi Kassotis was murdered. Her body was dismembered, and the man she had trusted completely had been, for years, constructing a set of lies sophisticated enough to bury the truth for months. The 2nd of December, 2022. A cold Friday morning, deep in rural Liberty County, Georgia. The Portal Hunting Club stretches across approximately 13,000 acres of swamp and woodland near Riceboro, roughly 40 miles southwest of Savannah. It is believed to be the oldest hunting club in the state, established in the late 1800s. The cinder block clubhouse has stood since 1956 on the edge of Bulltown Swamp. On that particular weekend, hunters had gathered as they did every season. It was supposed to be an ordinary day in the woods. Hunter David Owen Lovett had killed a deer earlier that morning. As he moved through the brush, something in a ditch along the edge of the woodline caught his eye. He got closer. He stopped. His first instinct, the instinct almost everyone in his position reports, was that what he was looking at simply could not be real. It looked, he said, like a mannequin. It was not a mannequin. It was a headless human torso. A second hunter, Philip McCalla, discovered a severed leg roughly 20 yards away, just 2.5 feet from the roadway. He too first thought it was something other than what it was. Then, the reality of what he was seeing became unavoidable. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation was called to the scene. Investigator Jack Frost, one of the first detectives to arrive, noted a Milwaukee fixed blade knife on the edge of the wood line, a black storage tote nearby bearing reddish-brown staining consistent with blood, and a scatter of cleaning wipes across the area. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Over the following 5 days, investigators worked through a 3-mile radius spanning Liberty and McIntosh counties. The victim's legs and head were recovered in separate locations. The head alone had been buried, the only part of her that had been given to the ground. The GBI had a homicide. They had the partial remains of a woman. They had a crime scene that spoke of planning, deliberateness, and a complete absence of remorse. What they did not have was a name. Nicholas James Casotes had a background that commanded respect. Born in 1982 in Peterborough, New Hampshire, he grew up in Fitzwilliam, the son of a police officer who later became the town's chief. He earned a bachelor's degree from Boston University, then a Juris Doctor from Northeastern University School of Law, and was later studying for a Master of Laws in National Security at Georgetown University Law Center. He was commissioned as a Navy JAG officer in June 2006. Over the following decade, he served in Norfolk, deployed to Baghdad as officer in charge of the Detainee Legal Operations Center, served as a legal advisor in Italy, and eventually worked at the Pentagon, advising senior officers on the most sensitive cases the military prosecuted. His first wife, Heather Thomas, described him this way: "He definitely had an air about him of confidence, of reassurance. He had a lot of friends. He just knew everyone. He was a talker." They married in 2009. The marriage lasted approximately 6 years before ending in divorce in 2015. The divorce settlement required Nicholas to pay Heather $1.5 million. He paid nothing, not one penny. A warrant was issued for his non-compliance. His legal career was under threat. Around the same time, he had borrowed heavily from a retired Navy commander named Cameron Nelson, a colleague from Naval Justice School. Over many years, he charged approximately $198,000 to her credit card, always promising to repay it. At trial, prosecutors asked Nelson directly whether he had ever paid back a single penny. She answered without hesitating, "Not a penny." These are not the actions of a man who had drifted into difficulty. These are the actions of a man who had decided that other people's resources, their trust, their belief in him, existed to be used. There was one other thing about Nicholas Casotes that would only become significant later. In his spare time, he wrote horror fiction. Under the name Nick Morfox, he published short stories on Reddit's no-sleep community, a corner of the internet where writers deliberately blurred the line between what was real and what was invented. In January 2019, he posted a story called "My Mother-in-Law Was Poisoning Me, Then I Found Out Why." It went viral within hours. Thousands of people read it, shared it, and believed it. Sony Pictures purchased the film rights for over $300,000. The irony of what followed is almost too dark to sit with. The man who wrote horror fiction for a living, who understood, better than most, how to construct a story that felt entirely real, would go on to commit a crime so strange and so elaborately constructed that investigators would spend months simply trying to untangle what was true. He had spent years practicing the art of making people believe things that had not happened. And then he met Mindy. After they married, Nicholas and Mindy moved more than 50 times. Airbnbs, motels, short-term rentals scattered across Virginia, South Carolina, and Georgia. They never settled. They never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots. The reason, Nicholas told Mindy, was a man named Jim McIntyre. Jim, he explained, was an FBI agent, a figure from Nicholas's Pentagon days, now managing their movements for their own safety. There were threats, Nicholas said. Threats connected to sensitive work he had done. Every relocation was Jim's instruction. Every communication was to go through the encrypted Signal app, also on Jim's orders. Mindy was told not to go outside. She was told she might be followed. She believed, at various points, that undercover agents disguised as tree surgeons were planting cameras near their home. Morgan Paddock testified at trial. She was scared. Mindy had once told Morgan, "I may have had a tail." She was living less than a mile from Morgan's home in Savannah and had never once told her. Once, she told Morgan something that feels, in retrospect, like a warning she did not fully understand. "If you knew everything that was going on," Mindy said, "this would be like a best-selling novel." By June 2022, they were in Savannah. Mindy had told her friends she was pregnant, 8 months along, she said. Angela remembered feeling joy for her. She just wanted the fairy tale. Mindy was isolated, frightened, and dependent on a man whose control over her daily life was absolute. In September 2022, whilst still married to Mindy, Nicholas began exchanging messages with a horror fiction author from Pennsylvania named Samantha Kolesnik. He had found her through an online writing community. Within weeks, they were in a relationship. He told her nothing about Mindy. In late November 2022, Mindy was killed. It is worth pausing here, before we go any further, on the question that every person who hears this case eventually asks. How? How did a man convince a circle of intelligent, educated, caring people, a Navy commander, a retired colleague, a devoted mother who lived in the same house, to accept his account of things without ever asking for proof? The answer is that Nicholas did not convince them in a single conversation. He built the deception over years, layer by layer, until the framework felt like reality. He had made Mindy afraid to leave the house. He had established that all communication went through him. He had trained everyone in her orbit to accept that their lives operated under unusual rules, rules connected to classified work, to genuine danger, to a world most people would never understand. By the time he told them Mindy was dead, he had already spent years teaching them not to ask questions. When you understand that, the question is no longer why they believed him. The question is whether any of us, conditioned the same way, would have done anything different. Mindi Kassotis was never reported missing. In the days after she died, Nicholas contacted her family and friends separately and told each of them a version of the same story. Mindy had been admitted to hospital to regulate her blood pressure. She had suffered a sudden and catastrophic deterioration. She was gone. He told her mother, Betsy, Mindy is not coming home. He told Angela she had been cremated. He told Mindy's employer she had developed sepsis. He moved Mindy's parents briefly into a home in Hilton Head and promised a memorial in the new year. The memorial never happened. Months later, Mindy's family received an email informing them that Nicholas himself had died in a car crash. He had faked his own death. Nobody asked for a death certificate. Nobody asked for the name of the hospital. Nobody asked to speak to a doctor. This is not because the people in Mindy's life were careless or indifferent. It is because Nicholas had spent years making himself the only window anyone had into their world. He had not just isolated Mindy. He had, quietly and methodically, isolated everyone connected to her. By December 2022, GBI forensic artist Kelly Lawson had produced a facial reconstruction of the unidentified woman found at the Portal Hunting Club. The sketch was released publicly on the 13th of December. A second updated rendering followed in January 2023. Hundreds of tips poured in, none led anywhere. Nobody in Mindy's circle was looking, because everybody in Mindy's circle had been told she was already dead. The body in the ditch had no name, and it had no name because the man who put her there had been extraordinarily careful to ensure that nobody would come looking. Then something changed. Heather Thomas, Nicholas's first wife, the woman who had watched the man she married become something she no longer recognized, was searching online one evening in early 2023. She was looking for information about Nicholas, who had supposedly died in a car crash, and somewhere in the middle of her searching, she came across the GBI's forensic sketch. She stopped.
Whoa, wait a minute. Like, that looks like Mindy. That looks like Mindy.
She contacted Georgia authorities. That single act, one woman's instinct in front of a drawing of a stranger, broke the case open. GBI investigators sought FBI assistance in investigative genetic genealogy. A private firm combed through public databases, identifying potential family trees linked to the DNA recovered from the remains. FBI analysts narrowed the field and visited Betsy Mabane to obtain a DNA swab for direct comparison. On the 11th of May 2023, nearly 6 months after hunters found the torso in a ditch in Liberty County, the remains were positively identified as those of Mindy Ruth Mabane Casotes. She had been dead since late November. She had been unknown through all of that time, whilst her killer lived under a different name, 2 states away, planning a wedding. The very next day, The 12th of May 2023, Nicholas James Casotes was arrested. He was not in Georgia. He was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, living under a completely different name. Sometime after Mindy's death, Nicholas had legally changed his name to Nicholas Killian James Stark. He had first begun messaging Samantha Kolesnik in September 2022 while still married to Mindy. He met her in person on the 16th of December 2022, 2 weeks after hunters discovered the remains at the Portal Hunting Club. By February 2023, he and Samantha were engaged. By April 2023, they were married. When he was arrested in Lancaster, the two of them were in the process of purchasing a house together. He had told Samantha he was a widower, that his wife and their unborn child had died 2 years earlier. She had no idea who he was. She did not know about Heather. She did not know about the unpaid judgment or the warrant. She did not know about Cameron Nelson. She did not know his real name. Samantha Kolesnik testified at trial. She described what she felt when the truth arrived. "I don't think words will ever capture how I felt," she said. "But if I had to choose some words, I'd say horrified, shocked, traumatized, violated, deceived." She sought and was granted an annulment. The FBI's Lancaster office, the U.S. Marshals Service, the Pennsylvania State Police, and the Liberty County Sheriff's Office executed the arrest. Nicholas waived his Miranda rights and gave a 2-hour statement without a lawyer present. When investigators sat across from him and began asking questions, he answered at length. He said "sir" constantly. Before statements, after statements, sometimes in the middle of sentences as if the word itself were a form of punctuation. Those who reviewed the footage later noted that the frequency seemed to increase precisely when the details he was providing became least verifiable. In forensic psychology and investigative interviewing, the frequent use of honorifics like "sir" is often interpreted not as a sign of respect, but as a potential deceptive verbal filler or a stalling tactic used to buy time while constructing a narrative. It is a small thing, but it is the kind of small thing that is very hard to unnotice once it has been pointed out.
Yes, sir. I told you where that knife is. Okay. Do you remember that building? No, sir.
Nick, did you love Mindy?
Yes, sir.
Did you love her parents?
Yes, sir.
Frank, is that it?
Yes, sir.
You want to help us put all this together?
Yes, sir. We're gonna.
So we need you to be truthful with us.
Sir, I'm being honest.
Is that right?
Sir, yes, I am.
You did to get away from the judgment from Heather.
No, sir.
So you didn't know you were wanted and on the run from Heather and the judgment, the civil judgment?
No, sir. Jim told me that I've been taken care of.
How did Jim take care of that?
I don't know, sir. Sir, I never hurt my wife.
Yes, you did.
I've never put a hand on a woman. I did not hurt Mindy.
But you lie. And you lie a lot about a lot of things. And have continuously lied.
Sir, I've been told to lie in certain situations to keep us safe.
You've been an attorney.
The investigation had been building for months before the arrest, and by the time the trial opened in Liberty County Superior Court in August 2025, the evidentiary record was formidable. Investigator Jack Frost traced the knife found near the torso to a Home Depot purchase made on the 29th of November 2022, the day investigators believe Mindy may have been killed. The store was 50 minutes from the Portal Hunting Club. Surveillance footage showed Nicholas leaving after paying, the knife visible under his arm. The transaction was on his own debit card. The day before, the 28th of November, his card had been used at a Bass Pro Shop in Savannah, where he bought a 7-piece field dressing kit designed for hunters. It contained an assortment of blades and a bone saw. Earlier that month, he had purchased a shovel and a hammer. In August, Clorox wipes, latex gloves, and folding razors. A surveillance camera at a remote water pumping station less than a mile from where the torso was found captured his dark green Ford Explorer moving back and forth on the morning of the 29th. The vehicle's own GPS confirmed it had been to the precise location where the remains were later recovered. FBI cell phone analyst James Burney tracked Nicholas's phone activity that same morning, mapping it from the vicinity of the Home Depot towards Liberty County. Between approximately 10:30 p.m. and midnight, his phone went completely dark. No calls, no texts, no data. A deliberate blackout. At the couple's Savannah rental home, GBI agents applied Blue Star chemical reagent in a darkened room and detected significant reactions on a blue futon bearing reddish-brown staining. The stain had seeped through the fabric and into the mattress beneath. Based on how the futon was positioned, the location of the stain suggested that Mindy had been seated when the fatal blows were delivered. The landlord testified that when Nicholas vacated the property, the rug in the den had been removed and replaced. Medical examiner Dr. Keith Lamar Lehman found 9 lacerations to Mindy's head, including one deep enough to fracture her skull. There were cuts and bruising across her chest and abdomen, and defensive wounds on her arms and the backs of her hands. She had fought back. A non-lethal concentration of Benadryl was found in liver tissue. The cause of death was confirmed as homicide caused by traumatic injury. And then there was the fact the autopsy confirmed, quietly and finally and devastatingly. Mindy was not pregnant. She had been telling people she was 8 months along. The post-mortem found no evidence of a fetus. Prosecutor Lori Bio said it plainly. I think he found out she wasn't pregnant. Nicholas Casotes had one defense left, and he delivered it himself. He took the stand as the sole witness called by the defense and testified for over 3 hours. Jim McIntyre, he insisted, was real. Jim had directed their every move for years. Jim had given him instructions right up until the end. I gave Jim McIntyre access to literally everything, Nicholas said from the stand. He had access to our home. He had all of our bank accounts. He said the couple had lived in terror, that every relocation was at Jim's direction, that he had surrendered his own autonomy entirely to a man he trusted with his life. During his earlier interrogation, investigators had asked him directly.
So my point is, everything you do, Jim told you to jump off a cliff, you were going to jump off a cliff.
Yes, sir. For years. For years we did exactly what you told.
He had an explanation for everything. The Milwaukee knife was for a broken window screen. The deer processing kit was a Christmas gift for a family member. He was afraid of blood and could not have dismembered another person. As for why he had never sought to subpoena McIntyre or produce any record of the man's existence, he offered a response that revealed more than he likely intended. I thought the state would do that, but you all didn't really care that much. GBI Special Agent Tracy Sands had searched for Jim McIntyre in the Savannah area. He found exactly one man of that name, an older gentleman who managed a dental implants company with no law enforcement background and no conceivable connection to the case. His own defense attorney, Doug Weinstein, acknowledged the problem without flinching. I have no evidence that Jim McIntyre exists, Weinstein said after the verdict. I have no picture. All that we have on Jim McIntyre is what Nick has told Mindy. There is a particular quality to watching a man with a decade of Pentagon experience and a proven ability to make intelligent people believe almost anything, sit in a courtroom and explain that he had handed over control of his bank accounts, his email, his social security, and every decision about his own life to a man he could not name, could not locate, and had never once asked to verify. He had bought the knife on his own debit card. He had driven his GPS-equipped car to the disposal site. He had left behind the kind of evidence trail that would embarrass a first-year law student. Prosecutor Lori Bio addressed the jury in closing and kept it simple. Can't find a person that doesn't exist? I submit to you, there is no Jim. The jury deliberated for just over 1 hour. On the 14th of August, 2025, the jury returned its verdict at Liberty County Superior Court in Hinesville, Georgia. 12 counts, malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, concealing the death of another, possession of a knife during a felony, removal of body parts from a scene of death, tampering with evidence, 5 counts of possession of a tool during the commission of a crime, guilty on all 12. A muffled cry came from Mindy's family in the gallery. Nicholas Casotes sat still and showed nothing. Judge Charles Rose imposed the sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 25 consecutive years. His words from the bench were unsparing.
This case has revealed a level of depravity that truly shocks the conscience. You wrote fiction, and your life was a fiction. And then you carried out a brutal, horrific, gruesome murder of Mindy, someone who's been described by various witnesses as beautiful, kind, loving. Her life tragically cut short by you. Someone who professed to love her, to care for her. Just the ultimate betrayal. And then you desecrated her body in such a vile way. When I described to this jury this morning the elements of the crime, the language used in the Georgia statute is that the circumstances show an abandoned and malignant heart. That describes you.
Nicholas Kassotis said nothing. Those who loved Mindy, and those who had survived Nicholas, spoke at sentencing. Megan Mabane looked directly at him. You are a pathological liar. You thought you were so much smarter than everyone else. You deserve to sit in prison for the rest of your life and think about Mindy every single day.